interesting conversation. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mo Alathe. I'm Executive Director of the Institute of Politics and Public Service here at the McCourt School. Today's conversation is really going to focus on the home stretch. Here we are in the final days of the campaign, and as anyone that's been following the news just in the last 30 minutes knows, it's an incredibly volatile, fluid, and ever-changing dynamics in this campaign, which I think is very true to form for the way this campaign has played out from the very, very beginning. The panelists here today, I could not be more appreciative of you being here today. I know how busy it is for everyone, having worked on a number of campaigns. I know what the final 10 days are like, and so it's a testament to all of you that you would take some time to have this conversation with the students here in the room, as well as the broader community that is watching live on Facebook Live right now. We want you guys to be engaged, ask questions, follow along on all the social media channels at GU Politics, and please be an active part of this conversation. To introduce the panelists formally, I'm going to invite up Carolyn Wool, a freshman in the college, who will give a formal introduction. And we are going to be on time today, out of here on time. These folks have important work to do. So thanks.
The bio for two people, so I'm not sure who's joining up here after this. But on my right, so yours left, I have Stoddard, who is an associate editor and columnist of RealClearPolitics. She had covered U.S. Congress since 1994 for the state's news service, the Hill newspaper, and is the Senate producer for ABC News. She returned to the Hill in 2006 as a commentator and columnist, where her column won first place from the Society of Professional Journalists, Washington chapter in 2010 and 2011. Stoddard appears regularly on Fox's Special Report with Brett Baer, as well as other shows on Fox's News Channel, Fox Business Network, and CAN. Stoddard began her career as a reporter in Northern Virginia at Potomac News. And on my left, I have Sean M. Spicer, who served as RNC Communications Director since 2011, and in February of 2015 added the duties of Chief Strategist. In his additional role, he coordinates with broadcast networks and conservative media partners, and serves as a liaison to Republican candidates and their campaigns. Sean has also led negotiations and the implementation of the new presidential primary debate structure, and in addition, he works with the Council's Office and the Chief of Staff on assisting state parties with delegate selections and planning for state conventions, primaries, and caucuses. He also serves as a liaison to the Republican National Convention staff on messaging opportunities and media strategies. So, welcome to the review.
And then Mr. Hart's bio. Sure. Adam Hodge is the Communications Director for the Democratic National Committee. Adam most recently served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the U.S. Treasury Department after first serving as its spokesperson. At the agency, he helped lead the Obama administration's effort to highlight the economic recovery from the worst recession since the Great Depression. Prior to his stint at the Treasury, Adam was a regional press secretary and the director of African American media at the DNC. He also worked at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in the Office of House Majority Whip James Clyburn, and at the House Oversight Committee for Senator Chris Dodd. Adam is a graduate of Wesleyan University, where he received a BA in government. Welcome.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming in. I'm going to be talking with Sean and Adam for about half the program, and I've invited them to not interrupt each other, but each will have the opportunity to courteously add something on to the other one's points if they would like, and then I will engage your tough questions for them starting, I think, around 2 o'clock. So we look forward to those. And I'm going to, in light of the interesting news, we could have scratched our first question, but I'm going to do a little big picture softball. I'll start with you, Sean, since you're raring to go. What is the closing message in this last stretch of the campaign for your candidate?
Well, first, I want to say thanks for being here. I couldn't start a program like this without, I'm not a little bitter that Georgetown didn't let me in. But I would know that there's 2 Connecticut college graduates sitting yeah, so
Georgetown didn't let me in either.
It's been 30 years, but we're not bitter.
And Wesleyan is in Connecticut.
I know. There's a league, it's called the NESCAC League, the New England Small College, and we are so pompous in Division III that we don't go to we're so focused on academics, all of us didn't get into Georgetown. We don't allow postseason play. Like, that was the problem. But, look, I think the closing message is going to be what it has been. It's a contrast. It's a change election, and it's a question of whether or not we want change, or whether or not you want someone who's been around for 30 years and is basically the beacon of the status quo of the establishment. And it is plain and simple, and that's really what it comes down to. And I think that what we need to do is continue to hammer that home over and over again. And when you look at the polls, one of the things is fairly obvious, which is if you're with Hillary Clinton, you're with her. And I think she has a very loyal supporter file. I mean, there are people that will walk through, glass doors for her, that they believe in her. But there's a lot of people who have completely written her off and say, no way, no how. What we need to do is get those people to come over to our side in this closing few days.
I think our closing argument has been consistent really from the day this campaign began.
Which is, I believe, the fifth.
Yeah, no, which is we took
Wait till the end, Sean.
we took over in 2008 after 8 disastrous years of the Bush administration in the middle of the worst recession since the Great Depression. We've made a ton of progress thanks to President Obama's leadership. And the question before the American people is, do you want to sort of continue in that direction with the policies that we know have worked over the last 8 years and really build on that progress and continue doing it together? We think that our country and our economy are stronger when everybody has a part, when everybody is part of that shared prosperity. We have seen that has actually been effective over the last 8 years. Unemployment is at its lowest since well before President Bush left office. We just saw a great economic report this morning. The economy grew at 2.9%, the fastest in a couple of years. And so the question is, are we going to continue on that trajectory? Or are we going to go back to a lot of the same failed policies that we think caused the last recession? Less regulation on Wall Street, less sort of a free wheel on a climate, and some other just big ticket issues. We think and we have been talking about issues and solutions to many of those challenges that we face. An economy that's stronger together, making college more affordable, making debt free. I know that's something, even for Georgetown students, that is definitely a real issue. Making sure that we continue reforming the criminal justice system and acting on climate. Those are key issues that we know resonate across spectrums, and I think we're going to continue making that argument for the last 11 days.
Okay, October 28th is an important day for Sean Spicer because in 2013 he put a memo out just talking a lot about these days, which is that the RNC had studied the 2012 election. Sean and I had some discussions back and forth back there before Election Day about whether or not the Romney ground game could compete with the Obama ground game. And what the RNC did very surely was really take a look at the mechanics of the get out the vote operation on the Democratic side. And I will quote Sean in this memo from 2013, October 28th. While in the past we might have measured the RNC's success by the amount of cash we piled up 3 months before Election Day, that will no longer be the case. We can't let the money sit in the bank. We can't parachute in a few days before voters head to the polls. We have work to do and we are. And what they established was an effort long before they knew who was going to be running the primaries to infiltrate the right communities and battlegrounds and make sure they were building voter relationships and trying to replicate the impressive results that the Democrats had gotten. So a lot of questions recently have gone to Sean and others in the party about how pitiful the Trump ground game is. Even Trump supporters have complained about it, and Sean is here to make his case for why what the RNC had prepared is adequate, if not superior, that field offices don't represent door knocks, and I'll give you the floor, Sean.
Well, thanks. I mean, so let's go back to context. I think the memo is important. if you go back to how parties traditionally operated, especially the Republican Party, we'd stockpile a boatload of cash, and in the last 90 days, we would blow it on TV ads. And frankly, what Obama taught us in both, so even if you go back, what Bush did was create this 72-hour task force. They went out and they realized you could, what they called micro-targeting at the time, start to realize when people voted, what persuaded them, and go out there in the last 72 hours really persuade them. But what sort of has happened is that the time's caught up. More and more people now, 40% of people are going to be early voting. And not just voting early, but making up their minds earlier. And so what we realized in Romney is we didn't suffer from a lack of cash. We had plenty of money, and we stockpiled it, and we blew $54 million on ads at the end. The problem is that when you went back and you looked at the electorate, you found out that most people made up their decision when to vote on September 1st. But, I mean, the majority of Americans. And so you were spending money to persuade people that had pretty much made up their mind and or voted. And what's really interesting is that if you remember back 4 years ago, there was the first debate, Romney cleaned Obama's clock by everybody's imagination. And everybody thought for somehow that was going to translate into votes. And I don't mean to always, I tend to use sports analogies a lot, but you can have a favorite team and objectively say, my team lost, and that doesn't make you any less of a fan. And so I think some of the Romney people were like, wow, everybody says Romney won. And he did. He won the debate, and I think Obama probably would say, yeah, he won the debate. But there was this disconnect between somehow thinking, okay, therefore I'm going to get a ton of votes. But people had already made up their mind. They might not have think he played the game well, but they still were fans of the team. And so we went back and we started to say, wait a second, this is silly. What Obama did was he got in the field early, he got in the communities early, he knew when people were going to vote, what the issues were, and instead of taking that 54 million or 80 million, whatever we can raise, what if we just start spending it every day post-2012? We get into these communities, we start building relationships, and we've done it. We've employed more people for longer than anyone before. Hillary and their campaign put a lot of people in the field in the last few months. That's great. We've had a majority of our field staff in the field for the last 4 years. And we think that based on the Obama model, that longevity matters. Being in those communities, making those voter persuasion, because you're learning more and more about people the longer you're there, and you can, what we call a pen the voter file. We can learn more about a voter, what makes them tick, when do they tick, what are the key influences in their life, and so we can create a fuller picture of every voter. I think that's benefited us. We have more voter contacts than ever before. We've exceeded everything we did in 12. But here's the thing, and this is how I'll just end with this. At the end of the day, elections are about votes. That's all that they're really about. You can have no money, and if you win the election, then great. If you have all the money in the world and you lose the election, right? So it doesn't, all of these tools are for one goal, and one goal only, and that's to win. And if you don't win, having the best ground game in the world doesn't matter. If you have the worst ground game and win, then that's great. I mean, that's what the ultimate thing that you're getting judged on. And so, well, what do we know about where we are right now, right? As of today, we are in better shape in our early vote and our absentee vote than ever before. That's an undisputable fact. So when you look at Nevada, Florida, Ohio, Iowa, in every single case, the Republican early vote and absentee vote is above where it was in 2012. Okay, so it's not a disputable fact whether or not our ground game is better than it was before. The results are there to show for it. On the inverse, the Clinton campaign likes to talk about how many offices it has open. Great. If you look at, for example, Ohio, the 3 best performing Obama counties, Franklin, Summit, I'm missing one, are down between 8 and 14% from where they were. If you look at their absentee ballot returns in North Carolina, they're down. And in almost every one of these places, their absentee ballot and early vote returns are down where they were in 2012. So as much as people want to talk about offices and number of staff, the biggest metric is, are you getting your people out to vote or not? Our people are up, theirs aren't. And I think that you can have a discussion, and again, I get asked all the time, you're right, how many offices do you have open? No one on election day turns around and says, well, how many offices voted? And it is ironic that we're now being judged by that, which was the same thing we were being criticized for 4 years ago when we talked about things like that. We revamped our game, and now we're being criticized for not doing, for making the improvements that we were criticized for.
Okay, so Adam, I was gonna get to early and absentee votes in a later question, so if you can do both of these, start with the ground game,
Yeah.
what you inherited from the Obama people, any kind of, obviously amendments you made to the system, why maybe you wanna defend field office numbers, but you could do that and then do the early vote
Sure.
data separately, because I think it's really important for everyone here to understand these early vote reports that we keep reading every day. It's really hard to sort of navigate them.
Sure. Just a couple of things, and to pick up where Sean was leaving off, like the problem with the math that Sean was talking about and comparing it to 2012 is that we're not relying on 2012 numbers. The DNC and the campaigns have looked at what worked in 2012, and the campaign in Brooklyn has looked at what we did in 2012 and saw what can we do better. How can we target voters even more? How can we go into the different communities and perform even better than we did before? How can we register more voters? We've had a great voter mobilization surrogate on behalf, and that's Donald Trump. There are a number of voters who have come out to vote or have registered to come out and vote, partly in response to just I'm going to get out and vote. We've seen, for example, the number of Latino voters in Nevada, better from last week, and the number of Latino voters in Florida, North Carolina. We have increased the number, just the pool of voters that we have to try and get out to vote. And that really is a testament to not just field offices, but people who are going out and actually talking to voters and asking them what are the issues that they care about, going and then talking to those same voters about the issues that they care about and getting them out to the polls and getting them out to vote early. Just a couple sort of specific metrics to get, it's good to get in the weeds with this crowd. There are fewer early vote sites in North Carolina and Ohio right now than there were 4 years ago. And yet we're doing just as well, if not better, in both of those states with fewer places to early vote. So that means more people are getting out to vote at fewer locations, and that gives us a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to do and have a strong day on election day. In fact, we hope in many ways to win the election before election day. And so we're going to continue with the field operation that we have. We're confident that we're talking to the right voters and getting out in the right communities and encouraging them to get out and vote early, so that after they voted, they can go talk to their neighbors and their friends and have them get out to vote as well. We think that is a proven strategy. We think that will, and we're seeing it pay dividends in Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Nevada, where we're seeing the fruits of our labor. We've made unprecedented investments to do those things. And the DNC is also doing that to help down ballot races. So just last month, we gave the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and the House Campaign Committee $2.5 million each to do their own voter mobilization and engagement. That is a type of investment that will pay dividends not just at the presidential level, but also for the Senate and key and House races as well.
I make just 2 quick points, because I think it's like this crowd of any kind of gets this stuff, which is, so, we talk about 2012 and why we made the difference. Our guys would go by these Obama offices and call back to headquarters and be like, you're not going to get this. There's nobody in the office. We're kicking their butts. The problem is that they were out in the field talking to voters. Right? But our mentality was, let's get everyone in the office and we'll make phone calls. And what we realized is that, and again, this is what I find so ironic about the questions that I get from the media this cycle, is that Obama learned from Bush Cheney. And this isn't like, Republican spin. I mean, it's all, and each cycle evolves. You try to learn from the winning team last time. And so Bush Cheney afforded the 72-hour task force and micro-targeting, then I think Obama and Messina and Plouffe each evolved that into the next iteration of that. And we learned from them. But again, one of the things that we realized is that we're stuffing a bunch of people in offices making phone calls. And we literally would have these huge laughs about how many Obama offices we drove by and nobody was there. Ha ha ha, we're winning. And the problem was they were actually talking. So again, we go back to this metric now where the Clinton folks are like, guess how many offices we have? We're going, good, open more. Because those
offices are still empty. They're empty talking to voters in the neighborhood.
Okay, but the second point is this. one of the things that gets left out of the narrative when we talk about early vote is Democrats have to win big in early vote. That's when they vote big. Republicans love to just show up on election day. It's this whole like historic, I don't know what it is. It's something about getting up and pressing that button. But Democrats need to do really well. And so while they talk about early vote numbers, you have to keep it in context. So in North Carolina in 2012, Obama won North Carolina by 300,000 votes, and then Mitt Romney won. So you always, they will run up the score. But again, you look at these states, and Adam keeps saying, well, we're not looking at 2012. Okay, but if you're not doing as well as Obama did, and we're doing better in a lot of these states that are very close, I don't understand how the math possibly would work then.
Okay, two things. One, could you, I don't know that, I'm not saying Clinton's gonna win Arizona, and she has a gazillion field offices there because they stashed a lot of cash for the very reason that for those last minute opportunities that you say are kind of a waste of cash stashing. In case a red state became wobbly for Trump, and it indeed happened in Arizona, and their healthcare premiums are gonna spike over 100%. I'm not saying that she has a chance to win Arizona, but she's trying, and she had the money to mobilize last minute. And so it's stressful for, is it not stressful for an operation in Arizona where you were supposed to kind of take it easy and it wasn't going to be a battleground for them to come in, have more than 30 field offices and a whole bunch of cash to be able to jump on an opportunity like that when you were planning to defend other places? You weren't even planning to defend it, and you were planning to fight in Ohio and Nevada and Iowa and on and on.
So the supposition there is that it's going to work. I mean, again, I think we feel very confident in what our data tells us about some of these states. And so again, I think it's amazing. These guys are like, they go pop up a store, and you guys are like, oh my God, they're going to win. I mean, it's amazing the way that the press falls for this line.
Well,
and I've been there. I mean, look, I've been at the RNC for 6 years. Every cycle, presidential and then congressional, the same story. Literally, you talk about being an advocate of recycling. It's literally like, oh my God, will Arizona go? Will Texas go? It never, in Georgia. I mean, it's the same story every cycle. And then you go, well, maybe next cycle it'll be different. But there's no data that suggests that's going to happen. The other thing that's important, again, is if you think about the states that were in play, it's amazing to me when you look at the states that are in play that twice went for Obama. New Hampshire, Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania, the list goes on and on. It's actually ironic. Trump's grown the map, not Trump the map. I mean,
right.
So the real story is, why is Clinton having to play defense in multiple states that Obama carried
But
twice?
he's playing defense in Georgia. I mean,
No, you say he's playing defense in Georgia.
So the polls are tight in Georgia.
No,
that means he's not
but
playing
again,
defense?
we're not out there opening stuff in Georgia. We feel confident about where we are in Georgia.
Okay.
And that's the funny thing, is you guys in the media keep deciding what we're doing, and like you just said, you're on defense in Georgia. Says who?
Says the polls.
No, they. I think
I mean, I'm
we
only
saw that on
using
CNN
the
once.
polls.
No, I get
That
it.
was
but
as of this morning.
I understand,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is, we feel very good about where we are there.
Okay.
And so, to suppose what we should or should not be doing is kind of interesting, because I can tell you where our money is and where our resources is and where we think we can do well.
Okay, Adam, there's been, and then we have to come back to another question for both of you on early vote specifically, but you're seeing sort of an unenthusiastic African-American early vote in some places. In Ohio in 2012, Obama registered something like 200,000 new African-American votes. He knew that he might lose. Not a lot of excitement in 2012 as there was in 2008, and he would have lost Ohio to Romney because his margin was lower than that with Romney had he not registered those new people. Is your operation planning for drop off like that in your ground game and your mobilization efforts?
No, I think the goal is to try and get as many folks out to the polls as humanly possible in the next 11 days. I think you've already seen, in Cleveland may not maybe slightly less than 2012, but we've seen an uptick in Franklin County around Columbus. We know that the numbers, given the number of early vote, and I mentioned this earlier, the number of early vote locations are fewer in Ohio, but we're still keeping up with our early vote numbers from 4 years ago. That's point number one. I think number two, we know that the investments that we've made and the folks that we're talking to on the ground are going to get out to vote. I mean, there's still 9 more days of early voting in Ohio, I think, and that we have that final Sunday and then Mondays. And so I think we are fully confident that come election day, we will get the numbers that we need to get in Ohio. And I think part of that is also that you're seeing folks respond to like the message. Just look at the event that the First Lady had in North Carolina with Secretary Clinton. That is the type of thing that fires up our supporters to get out and vote. I think you're going to see a big bump in North Carolina. I know there's more events planned in Ohio. I think the president being in Ohio last week also will help lead to more folks getting out to vote. But we think that we're gonna win because we have laid the groundwork to get folks out early.
Okay, the other question is, everyone here is reading that you all might know where everything stands on Monday, on Halloween, with early vote. And I know that's a bunch of estimates, that if you run up score over here, it would be hard for Trump to overcompensate here. But can you explain, both of you, from your own standpoints, and Sean, we can start with you, whether or not that's a myth, that you're all gonna know something a week out?
No, I don't, especially in a year like this, to suggest that a week out you're gonna know. And especially, not just because of the vote, but, I mean, because of the data, but I mean, you look at a day like today, you know, and again, I don't mean to put on that, but we've had our days, believe me. But you wake up one day, and I'm literally driving here, and everyone's going, oh my, you know, did you see that the FBI just sent a letter saying they're reopening the investigation of Clinton? I don't know if you guys heard that. But
John's going to try and say
you
that
can hear it here twice.
But every day there's a new, and the thing that I think why that's different is I think that there's a lot of Americans, not a lot, I mean enough, that are, for, you know, like I said last cycle, I think a lot of people made up their mind early and they got out and voted. They were like, I'm going with Obama, I'm with Romney, whatever it was. This cycle, I think that they're kind of, you know, I think I might be with Hillary, I might be with Trump, I want to listen to Trump a little bit more. And so because of that, and because of the disclosures that keep coming out about the Clinton campaign, we don't know what else. I mean, normally they talk about the October surprise, and it's now been like plural. The October surprises, and it just keeps going. And we've got some 3 days left of surprises. So I think that up until election day, I wouldn't presuppose anything. And again, the margin of error on these polls are usually plus or minus 4 or 5 or whatever. And so there is enough volatility, there is enough question about who's going to turn out, who's not going to turn out, that until they make that final call on election night, I think this thing could be a very interesting election evening.
I mean, I think, look, in 2008, the margin in early vote was so severe that we, like, I think had very good confidence the day before election day that we were going to win. I think in 2012, the margin was slimmer, but I think we still felt pretty confident that if we had the election day that we needed to have, that we would win. I think this election, I think that pattern will hold. I think if you look at the from all three debates, you had 3 key moments where approximately 85 million Americans watched the debate, watched Hillary Clinton clean Donald Trump's clock 3 times, and saw, then went out and voted the next day. We went and targeted, and we got our folks out to vote. Like, if you had any question about what's at stake in this election, even a state like Arizona, you know, where Donald Trump goes out and calls, you know, there's a bunch of bad hombres. You better believe in Arizona the next day, there were a lot of Hispanic and Latino voters that we were targeting, went out to vote and voted for Hillary Clinton that same day, and that's what we're going to carry on for the rest of the election.
Okay. So Sean, the Bloomberg article from yesterday was a big deal because it showed the sort of more sophisticated data operation that people had kind of counted out for the Trump campaign. And in it, obviously, there was much back and forth. I saw you on Twitter about whether or not he owns a list that the RNC can't have, or the RNC owns a list. The article maybe got it wrong.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means in terms of the work that the RNC has done, like I mentioned, since 2013, long before there was a Trump in the race, let alone as nominee, and just the mechanics of what that means, like what you've invested in?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think going back to like the lessons learned, I think one of the things that we recognize with Obama is that this robust data set really helps you understand more about voters, right? And we had, I think, a really rich voter set, but we realized that the more we can grow this for the party, and not just for a single candidate, that it would benefit everybody up and down the ticket. And so we've invested over $154 million in data. And that means really having a robust 360 kind of degree view of a voter. That means like who's influencing them, what are they on social media, what is the issue that makes them move, do they activate or donate based on a certain thing. And then what happens is that we go into and we actually had it with almost all of our primary candidates, all 187 of them, is we enter an agreement where when they're out interacting with voters, that information comes back to the thing. So basically, we maintain that with the nominee, and in this case it was Trump, and they are able to mail our list, and then what happens is as they grow their list, it basically all comes into a single funnel. Yeah, it comes into a single point of contact. So if a voter makes, and remember that all of it is done off of a single app and an API. So when you're out there at a home, it's dynamic scripting. So if you answer the door and say, oh, my husband's home as well, we can flip over to husband and say, okay, he's more of an independent. He says he's a big education voter. And so all of that, no matter whether it's a Trump person or an RNC person, or whether they go out and buy something to append to the voter file, it all comes back to a central repository and benefits the entire list.
But what's the question of ownership going forward?
There isn't one.
The RNC owns it.
It is both sides own what they own.
Okay.
So in other words, if this is all the RNC data, if somebody donates, if they mail out something and then they donate to Trump, then that, once they activate to a positive Trump activation or donation,
Right.
then they are, the Trump folks, have equal access to that name.
Right, okay.
And vice versa. If they go out and buy some numbers and then they activate off of an RNC thing, then we get that. But both sides own what they put into it.
Okay, we're ready to open it up to the audience. Yes.
My question is for both of you on Florida. For Adam, there was an article, Politico, and The Hill, a few others, that it looks like maybe there are some people in the party who are upset about the Senate race, that maybe money should be shifted. Do you think, are you happy with it? How do you think it's working out? And why do you think it's not translating, whereas Clinton's leading in the polls in Florida, but Murphy isn't? Why do you think that there's that loss, it's lost in translation there? And then I guess for Sean, it would be, where do you feel like you guys are in Florida? Are you happy with the game? What's your strategy there?
So I think, one, we think that Patrick Murphy is a strong candidate, and at this stage of the race, the amount of money available to buy one more ad is not, it's gonna cost you $10 million just to put one ad on TV. What we do have, though, is just an unprecedented coordinated campaign operation that for all the voters that we've gone out and talked to about Hillary Clinton, we're also talking to them about Patrick Murphy. So they'll go out knocking in doors, and I guess Secretary Clinton was in Coconut Creek earlier this week. I just love saying that name. They were going out, and after that event, talking about Hillary Clinton and Patrick Murphy. And that is our field operation that the DNC and HFA are sort of co-invested in, and making sure we get those folks out to vote. I don't believe, there are some polls that had him down 10 points. I just don't believe that. And I think what you're going to see on election day is that we are going to perform extremely well at the presidential level, and I think that will help carry Murphy across the finish line. There's no question he's running against an incumbent, but though an incumbent who lost his own state in the primary and has some real sort of authenticity and credibility issues in Florida that I think make a candidate like Patrick Murphy, he presents a strong alternative, but someone who's going to be an independent voice. So we think, again, the coordinated operation that we're running is really what's going to make the difference on the ground.
I feel very confident in Florida, both in the Senate race and in the presidential race. Marco has just done a great job. He's run. Someone said the other day, do you think, why is Rubio running scared? I forgot what they were, and it's because he's running a great campaign. If you're in this environment and you're not running aggressively, he's not going to rest until. But there's nothing. There's everything from 10 to 7 years ahead. and then from a presidential standpoint, again, the last couple days, you continue to see that trend coming towards Trump, up 2, up 4. And that's the other big thing that I think is important when you talk about polls is, if I were going into the last 10 days, I'd rather be down 3, trending upwards, than up 3, trending down, right? So if you look at what a poll is you all know, it's a snapshot. And it's sort of, the best way to describe it is a car. If you take a photograph of a car going down the street, you don't know whether that car's going 5 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour. You just have a picture of a car, and that's it. And it tells you a lot, but it doesn't tell you much about what's really happening in terms of momentum, because it's just that one quick photo. What you see in a place like Florida and Ohio and Iowa is, again, the trend is, it was -1, dead even, +1. And again, that's not like a landslide, but you'd rather have, going into election day, that momentum with you.
I mean, the only thing I'd say back to that is that there was one Bloomberg poll that came out this week that had, but there have been a whole slate of polls in the last couple of weeks that had her up 4, 6 points in Florida. But we know Florida's going to be tight, it always is. But, if she wins Florida by 1.5 points in a state like Florida, that's a landslide in Florida for electoral politics.
There's actually a lot of evidence that there is, at least in the polls, and I know we can't believe all of them, and there's snapshots of a moment in time, but there's evidence that there's going to be a lot more tickets split. So how do you get someone to carry Trump over, like the Marco Rubio or Ryan?
I actually don't. I mean, we have the data doesn't suggest that. It does suggest that when you go into the booth, it's not ticket splitting. You see a little bit sometimes of someone coming in and voting for the top of the ticket and then saying, I'm done, like I'm just voting for president, whatever. And you also see a little bit, and this is on both sides, and it's historic. I mean, a lot of it, but you rarely see on the Republican side people go into a booth and say, I'm not supporting the nominee. They generally come home.
Okay.
And I think you're seeing that both publicly and privately with a lot of folks who are coming back. The Republicans are coming home sort of piece by piece.
The problem is that a lot of those voters, the normal Republican voters who typically would be there, are just going to stay home because they don't want to vote for Donald Trump. I think you're seeing a number of Republicans who just I can't, in good faith and conscience, go vote for that person. So I think that's ultimately what's going to help or hurt Donald Trump on election day.
So my question is basically on the unprecedented number of undecided voters and the news that just broke. So it seems to me that it's unprecedented going less than 2 weeks into election day that a major party nominee is under FBI investigation. And I was wondering, mainly to Sean, but also to Adam, what your perspective is on how that decision will affect the massive number of undecided voters compared to this point in 2012.
I think it's going to continue to reinforce the narrative about Secretary Clinton. That's not a healthy one, and so that's a net positive politically speaking for us. When you constantly see that drip, and I mean, any time that you're in politics and the headline is opens FBI investigation, it's not like opens party or opens headquarters. I mean, those are the headlines you want, right? Opens headquarters, opens mouth. But opens FBI investigation is not a good headline. And so, and it puts, you talk about, some of the consternation that's occurred on our side of the ticket with people going on Cheryl on. I mean, it's very hard to go out and say, I'm going to go campaign with Hillary tomorrow when it's, the questions you're going to get asked, hey, do you, what's up with this investigation? So, I don't think it's obviously something that they were very excited to hear, but it is astonishing how Fridays are the FBI's day to make announcements. And long weekends. They have this thing about weekends these days. So I'm looking forward to next Friday.
Who knows what video your guy could be.
Hopefully it's a video of him reading her FBI investigation.
Past history would not indicate that. Well, the video we're going to see. I think it's too early to tell what's going to come of the news that just broke today. I think the thing that we can be most sort of focused on is that we know who our core voters are. We know what it takes to get them out of the polls, and we're going to execute that for the next 11 days.
Yes.
A common criticism of Secretary Clinton is that she takes poll-tested centrist positions, but a notable exception to that is her position on gun violence. So I'm curious,
since she's been pretty hardline to the left on gun violence, how much you think that could hurt her in a state like Arizona, for instance, which has a lot of guns, and 538, like a couple of minutes ago, said Hillary had a 49.9% chance of winning, so pretty much as toss-up as you can get. How much better would her odds be there if she didn't take such a hardline position on that?
Actually, in a state like Arizona, we just had, just this past week, former Representative Gabby Giffords out for us in Arizona. I think that is a different issue in a state like Arizona, just given the fact that one of their representatives was almost assassinated in the state. And we did not run away from that issue. And we had, the DNC had our Forward Together bus that has been going around the country with Gabby Giffords talking about this issue. I think that, and even to draw a parallel to a state like Missouri, or Jason Kander, you can be for gun control and be a responsible gun owner. And I think what Democrats have gotten much better at is talking about that issue in a way that is not talking about infringing on the rights of people to own guns, but to do so in a safe and responsible way. And the polls show that the majority of people who own guns actually believe that as well. So we're just not an issue that we think in a state like Arizona actually will hurt us. But we're just gonna keep running on the issues and talking about other issues like making sure the economy works and immigration reform and education. So.
Any other questions? Yeah, oh, in the back here. Okay, you, and then we'll go to the corner. Thank you.
In 2012, the Republican National Committee came out with an autopsy for the party regarding how to become more open to minority voters and to minority communities. And that really didn't work in this 2016 election with the party straying more to the right, as well as the Democrats straying more to the left with candidates like Sanders and Warren. To you, Mr. To the Republican Party, what's the future of the Republican Party, and to bring in more minority community voters and more disaffected voters after this election? And to the Democrats, what does the future of the party look like? Is it going to go more to the left, or is it going to be a healthy combination of both?
So a couple things. One, that report had 218 recommendations in it. And it was to the party at large. For the most part, there were specific parts to different aspects of the party, whether it was Congress or to governors or to Senate state. But to your point about that aspect of it, I would argue that as a party, as an RNC, we have reached out more. We've hired more people. We've gone into more communities. And so I don't really agree with the assessment. I mean, it's from a go out, reach out, target more, whether it's attend events, appear on more. I mean, but the effort has been there as well. With respect to Mr. Trump himself, I know sometimes the message may get muddled, but if you actually look at what he's done and where he's been, 2 days ago he announced his American Renewal Project to go into urban cities and create jobs programs, rebuild different things, and using. But you look at just where he's been: Detroit, Philadelphia, Baton Rouge, Cleveland. You know, the number of inner cities and urban areas and minority communities and churches that target minority groups is probably more than the last couple nominees combined. Now, I will say, I mean, I get that there's sometimes the message is off, or gets muddled, or gets stepped on, or whatever. But at the end of the day, what that report said is we need to go into these communities and we need to have that conversation. We're doing it. Now, I will say that in a lot of cases we need to do more of it, we need to do better of it. If you look at the candidates, especially in 2014, that yielded those recommendations, they did well. Now, and then the last thing I'd say is that you also have to remember where we are. McCain got 4% of the black vote, Romney got 6%. I will tell you that I think that Trump will get more than that. Now, again, 8%, 9%, 10%, that's not great. I mean, you all know when you call your parents and be like, hey, I got a 60, but remember I got a 50 last semester. They're not like, hey, good job. Like, you know, we're paying whatever this is $55 grand a year now, whatever you guys get charged. You know, and so that's not a good number, and we're not satisfied with that number. But I think, you know, you do need to keep it in perspective. And I think that when you look at our actual efforts to go out and reach these communities, it has been more than we've ever done before.
So I think, just on pick up that, I mean, it is one thing to go in the community and talk about, go there, but to go there and say, you know, what do you guys have to lose? You're living in war zones, you know, or you talk about even in Hispanic communities and saying, you know, people, the rapists or that all just goes, I mean, anything you try to say, I mean, people just say, you're not actually trying to have a real conversation with me about the issues that I care about. But I think to the platform, that, I mean, the party came together despite the primary that everybody would say was an aggressively fought primary behind the most aggressively progressive platform in our party's history. And it's something that we own, and we're you know, we think that there is much more work to do to make college more affordable and make it debt-free. We think there's much more work to do on climate. We think that there is much more work on you know, building an economy excuse me, that works for everybody. Those are things that the party is united behind, and I think I mean, in 2008 we ran on an aggressive party platform. President Obama got elected on an aggressive party platform, and he governed on an aggressive platform, a progressively progressive platform, and he's at 58% approval rating right now because we acted and we got a lot of the things that we said we wanted to get done. And I think we will continue to do that. And when President Hillary Clinton is in office, she's going to pursue those exact same policies that were in our platform. And we think it will continue the progress that we've seen in the last 8 years.
Yes.
Hi, thank you both for being here today. We really appreciate it. For Mr. Spicer, I was just wondering, looking forward to 2020 or even 2024, I know Chairman Priebus has said a little bit that maybe the party won't be comfortable supporting a candidate in another election who didn't get behind Mr. Trump in this election. I was curious as your thoughts on that, because I know at Georgetown, among a lot of millennial Republicans, there are a lot of Republicans here that do not back Donald Trump and are not very comfortable with that position. And then I guess really for both of you, how long do you see the legacy of Donald Trump lasting in these elections through 2020, 2024, and so on?
So on the first part, you're asking specifically about, I'm just trying to.
Chairman Priebus had said a few weeks ago that maybe.
Oh, right, on the previous candidates.
Yeah.
I think, look, the candidates that ran gave their word that they would do certain things in exchange for access to certain aspects of data. And the chairman's point is simply that we need to relook at this. I mean, if you can't, you're getting access to millions of dollars of an investment that we put in. It gives you access to these Republican voters in return for you saying simply, I will agree that I will support the nominee if I'm not that person. And I think that, you know, it's disappointing if somebody makes a deal with you, and then there wasn't an and but clause to this, right? And so I understand, I'm not saying that I completely don't understand some of their concern, but I also believe that at some point then that's what contracts are. I mean, you don't get to turn around and say, well, if I had known the following, I would have signed this, or I would have asked for an addendum. Then you should have voiced those concerns at the time. I think he's frustrated because he spent a lot of money on behalf of the party to do something and make sure our candidates had these tools available to them, at no cost, by the way, in return for simply saying we're going to support the party. And I think it's something that has to be revisited. And it's just, again, I think that what he's saying is we've got to have a discussion after the election within the membership whether or not that those mechanisms need to be looked at or revised or discussed. But that you can't just sort of forget that happened. And then as far as the second part of your question, I think winning changes a lot of things. I mean, like, look, I mean, but it's just
A lot of different assessments after.
right. I mean, I think you get after the election, and then you'll see. I mean, a lot of it depends on a lot of X factors at this point.
I just think, and I know we're gonna, I think it's gonna be hard for the Republican Party to get rid of the stench of Donald Trump. I think partly because the voters that came out, and I mean, there's no question, they are Republican voters. And I think, I think what the country needs, and I think what will help in general, is to have a Republican Party that approaches and wants to try and work cooperatively on solutions and work with Democrats. Like, look, there are challenges that we cannot get done without like a well-functioning Republican Party who brings forth real good ideas that we find compromise on. Like, that's just the nature of our democracy. That's what's gotten us here over the 226, 7 years that I could see this is why I didn't get into Georgetown. But I think like there are, but I think I think that's what the American people, they want both parties to work together. They after Election Day, I think what they want more than anything is for a President Hillary Clinton, and regardless of the makeup of the Senate and the House, for them to work together to solve the challenges that we have. Like that is what we need to do as a country. And I think the Republican Party will have to get there. We hope that we can do it together. That's optimistic, maybe on my point, but that's where I am.
Hi, going back to the question on like minority vote, you both mentioned getting like urban, like getting to like urban communities, but like what about minorities in like suburban or even rural communities? Like, is the party like are the Democratic and Republican parties like doing any outreach for that? Because personally, I don't like live in like an urban area, so.
Just last week, our bus tour was in Navajo country in northern Arizona, going and talking to those voters about why they should come out to vote in Arizona and come out and elect Democrats. That is an important part of our constituency. I will say one of my most cherished pieces of swag from the 2012 campaign is a Rural Iowans for Obama trucker hat that I wear almost every week. And it was true, like the Obama campaign, we were out in rural Iowa talking to farmers and voters about the issues that they care about and getting them out to vote. We don't think of ourselves as just an urban party. We think there are plenty of both suburbs, exurbs, and rural parts of the country that make up who our party is, and that's, I think, we know that makes us a much stronger party.
I mean, we're out. We've done a pretty good job of going out to most states, rural and otherwise, but I think where we identified the largest gap of where the party and our elected officials and candidates weren't going was to urban areas. And so this is more of I think we had been doing a lot of the rules stuff, going out to organizations and groups and churches and businesses and homes. But I think one of the things that we recognized is that we weren't making a concerted effort going to places that there weren't a high percentage of known Republicans. And so why you hear a lot about that effort is because it's not that we don't have other little areas that we need to keep doing well with or other constituencies, but I think the largest issue to solve at the time is to find different communities and different pockets of them to kind of go into first and foremost and say, okay, we've got to start there and then kind of work out.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to wrap up. Sorry, we're trying to keep to time here and I don't have a watch on. I wanna thank everyone, especially Adam and Sean, for their input today and for your questions. And I would just say on a parting note, as the nonpartisan here, this election has really threatened, I think, the duopoly. So look not only for his party to deal with bank haters and his party to fight over trade, but to the rules processes that change within each party. As this party almost missed an insurgent and this one nominated one, because I think as students of this process, you'll learn a lot in the weeks and the months to follow the results about where the parties are going to be, both on policy and process in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.